All right, welcome to Strider Tree Gear. You guys asked for it, so here's the review. I want to compare the Uni-Sender with the Akimbo. These are two, in function, really similar devices. They're both midline attachable, single rope or double rope compatible devices. So they're good to go head to head here. So I want to give you a little demonstration, but we're going to start with the Uni-Sender. So here's the Uni-Sender. It's made by Exotica. Thompson Tree Tools is the kind of the main developer, brilliant guy. Give him a follow if you get the chance. So the Uni-Sender's got a couple of key features. Obviously the midline attachability, but that's about the same. It's pretty easy to do, as you saw, to just thread on. It works with a pretty wide variety of rope diameters. Doesn't actually have the marking on here to say exactly how big of a rope it can go on, but it's at least this 1/2 inch thick. This is Samson Voyager, and I know it can go as small as Poison Ivy, which I think is a 10.8 or 11 millimeter rope. So it pretty much will span the gamut of arborist ropes. I have not yet found a rope that I climb on that I haven't been able to use it with. People who use it more have told me that what they'll do a lot of times is they'll start out using it on their thicker ropes. I mean their thinner ropes, and as it starts to wear in and as these edges that provide your friction start to wear out, they'll put it on their thicker ropes and just use those exclusively as it starts to slip on them with the thinner ones until it wears out. Speaking of wearing out, the downside of both this device and the Akimbo is that there are no replaceable parts. You essentially have to replace the whole device when it wears out every time. In this particular device, it's likely to wear out a little bit faster than the Akimbo because of a sort of a side effect of its main advantage over the Akimbo. So if you look really closely, all the contact points where the rope hits that rub that actually create the friction, they're fairly small radius, small contact points, but there's a bunch of them, kind of like the zigzag. A bunch of small contact points makes for a very smooth running rope. As you can see, if I pull down on that, it goes up. If I pull up on this, it's not going to fall through because this is a thick rope, but it's very easy to get up and down. And that's the result of lots of small contact points. The downside is those contact points are in aluminum and they tend to wear out fairly fast. So people who are using this regularly, you're probably not going to get more than a year's use out of it. And for a $300 device, that may not be enough for you. I could see you pretty easily going through 10 friction hitches in a year, and 10 friction hitches at about 30 bucks a piece, or one of these at $300. I know, it's half a dozen one and 6 for the other. So that each their own. The way this operates, when you're on a single line, is as shown here. If you're really dexterous and you kind of hold this side, you can kind of work with one hand. But what I find is that it's a little bit jumpy. It's not bad. A lot of guys can do it. It's sort of designed more to be used with this wrap, and then you pull on it. And now I can lower this and I can release myself really slowly. Now when I've got it mounted up double rope, it functions a little bit differently. As far as its double rope use here, this Poison Ivy's gotten a little fat from use over the years. It's still a thinner diameter than another one. You just clip onto there. Pretty straightforward. As I pull down, it pulls up. If I do a couple of pulls like this, the slack tail's pretty easy, and it grabs immediately. And more than anything, I think the advantage of this device over just about anything else I've used, no sit back, none. When it grabs straight out. But this is pretty easy to manage with one hand. And I'm through a friction saver right now, so it's fairly low friction. The other cool thing is if I can foot lock, or if I've got my foot ascender, when I pull down on this, it tends through effortlessly. I almost don't notice it's there. So it's super quick, no sit back. So as far as a double rope device, I find it works really well. especially on a nice thin line or through a friction saver. If you're using friction savers all the time, it's pretty nice. If it's too fast for you, you take a little wrap and it's easy. The one downside is it's a little bit tricky to tend one-handed. As for example, if I'm gonna come out here to do a limb walk, and walk right here along the edge of this grass, I can let it out pretty easy while most of my weight's on my feet. No problem, no problem. I get all the way out here, right? And I'm gonna start coming back in. Well, as long as I pull here, it's not so bad. If they actually sell a friction hitch device that moves it away from your body so you can pull a little bit more easily. If I'm pulling from down below, it's easy. If I pull from up above and I go to tend my slack, what I find up pretty often is that this little chunk of rope ends up outside of this catch. And unless you've got one of the aftermarket little devices to keep it in there, that happens all the time. So it can be a little bit annoying when you've got slack in the system, but on the whole, it functions very smoothly. That's why I actually have it semi-permanently mounted to this saddle as my rescue saddle. Any of my guys can slap this on a rope and use it. It's really straightforward. Alright, so I switch back over to single rope here, and I just want to point out that, okay, if I'm tending a bunch of slack and this thing's hanging below, it pretty often, like I was saying, comes out to here instead of being caught underneath this. One of the things that would make this perfect would be a little pulley here and a little catch that keeps this closed. Hint, hint, it's coming out on the next one. We don't know when it's going to come out, but I've seen the next version. Anyway, so here I am back on single rope. Say I want to do a little climb here. I want to show you how nicely this tends as I'm going up. So, got my little chest harness. I'm going to switch loops for that. Once that's on there, this thing actually climbs beautifully. So as I pull up, the angle of this changes and it tends right with me really nicely. And as soon as I go to sit down, boom, I'm held. Once again, no sit back, doesn't drop. It really does a good job staying put. But I want to also show you guys here the downside of not having a really easy one-hand operation. If I try and feather this, it's pretty on-off. It's hard, it's rough. I got two hands, no problemo. Or even after I use two hands, I can kind of use one and it still works out okay, but it's not quite as nice as the Akimbo or the zigzag and chicane. The biggest, and I'm going to say this over and over again hopefully, advantage of this device over the Akimbo is it doesn't care if your rope is a little bit pitchy or sapped up. I'm here in the Pacific Northwest. I climb a lot of Doug firs and ponderosa pines, and they can be really full of sap. This rope that we started out on is pretty sappy, and so I want to show you guys that it just doesn't care. I think it has to do with these small friction points, but it does a great job with this in this sort of scenario. Still buttery smooth. All right. Of course, if I try and do it one-handed, it's not great. Kind of jumpy. We'll throw my little loop over the top. No problemo, nice smooth descent. Easy going, despite the sappy rope. All right, so let's bust out the old Akimbo, eh? All right, this Akimbo doesn't get too much easier getting midline attaching. And the adjustability is pretty easy too. You don't need any adjustment for the Akimbo because it just works, but I mean for the Uni-Sender, but you do for the Akimbo. All right, so here I am set up on a double rope. As far as adjustments go, well, I'll talk about adjustments later. All right, here I am set up on a double rope. So I'm just gonna do a couple of, little bit of moving up here. It tends pretty well. I'm actually tending it here with my hand. I can clip into this loop up here, but what I've found with this Akimbo is because of a safety feature, if I lean back on this at all, it pops free, which drives me nuts, actually. As long as I'm upright, it tends well if I keep my chest really high, but as soon as I sit back, it pops free. Some will say that's a positive, some will say it's a con. For me, I find it annoying, but it's a safety feature so that apparently if you pull back on this too hard, you can actually release the mechanism, and that's no good. So you don't want it to release when it's not ready. But as far as a double rope system, it's fairly smooth, assuming your rope doesn't have any sap on it. So I can actually operate with one hand without too much trouble. If I'm coming over here to do a limb walk, I collapse it almost all the way, or all the way. See, a little bit of sap there is making it hard. And I can come out over here and I can limb walk. Coming back in, same kind of deal. I can pull in here and tend the slack. It's never going to come out, it's never going to change shape, but it's not quite as easy. I can't just pull it through as easily with as the Uni, but it tends more easily like a standard hitch, which is something that most of you should be used to doing. Or if I pull a bunch of slack through and then pull it out the end, no big deal. I don't have it on this nice swivel, which probably would make it perform a little bit better, but for this demonstration, it's not too different. It also grabs really quickly. It doesn't have any trouble with sit back. Probably my biggest gripe about it is it doesn't do well with sap, and my chest attachment point is usually more annoying than it is worth even having. So a lot of times I won't even attach the chest harness to it. I'll just advance it by hand as I'm going up, just like that, which isn't, you get used to it, but maybe perhaps not ideal. All right, so let's switch it over to a single rope setup here and see how it goes. So I'm mounting this on this Samson Voyager. Once again, this rope's had a little bit of sap in the last couple days, so we're gonna see how well it performs. I've been in at least one sort of non-pitchy oak tree since then, so it's cleared out a little bit, but I want to at least give you a general idea. All right, so here it is, a single rope. When it's working, it's very smooth to do one-handed. See how that jammed though? It's a little bit gummy. Here we go, going up. It's not always as quick to grab. It's got a little bit of sit back. It's not much, it's pretty good. As far as coming down, sometimes it goes, sometimes it doesn't. There you go. And then I'm stuck again. See, it's just not, this rope isn't even that sappy. If you look closely, there's one little spot here and that's where it jammed up pretty good. It's not much, and it's been a couple of days in pitch-free trees. And it'll eventually clear up to where I can use this again. But here's where the problem lies. This little device, it's got this one rounded edge. And when it gets pitchy there, it jams up into the rope as it feeds through and gets really tight. So it's hard to bust free. I could probably adjust the settings a little bit. As far as adjustability goes, this is awesome. See these little holes in this oblong shaped cam? I can actually adjust this cam by rotating it and setting it in different holes for different diameter rope. I've found that it seems to work best when the bottom one is fairly loose, fit most any rope, but the top one is tight enough to where you can just barely get the rope into it. So a notch or two tighter on the top than the bottom seems to work better, and obviously the more closely it fits the rope, the better. So if you've got one rope that's always your rope for oaks or some other fairly clean tree, you might find you really like this. It's very quick for getting off and on or switching systems in the canopy, but it is also adjustable. So there is the Akimbo. Great piece of kit. I find I use it a lot despite its drawbacks, mainly because it's so quick off and on. And I'm in a tree very often where I'll come up in a single rope, I'll switch to a double, or I'll come up double rope and I'll switch to a single. And so a lot of times I'll just take this with me. It's small, it's compact, I barely notice it on my saddle, and I'll just throw it on a new rope. But I usually keep a rope that's clean in the truck at all times. So I actually find I like it. Is it better than the Uni? I don't know, it's up to you. You'll have to see what you like. They both have their place, they have their advantages. Frankly, I'm really looking forward to the Uni-Sender 2, which should be coming out within the next couple of years. They've got a prototype going around by Thompson Tree Tools. It's a fantastic device, a lot of improvements, but you tell me, what do you use? What do you like to climb on? Thanks for joining me here at Strider Tree Gear. Don't forget to like, comment, subscribe, turn on notifications if you want to. And hopefully we'll see you back again. Thanks.